I told you to stay away from here.
We have a right to be here.
Not anymore. This is my land.
Sir, we can resolve this legally. The law doesn't apply out here.
What are you doing out here?
The real question is, what are you doing in my shed? We have permission to be here. Show me.
Fine.
The moment I saw my cabin door hanging open, I knew something was very wrong, and what I found inside made my blood run cold. My cabin sits deep in the woods, far from the noise of the city and even farther from the petty rules of any HOA, or at least, that's what I thought. I bought the land years ago specifically because it wasn't part of any homeowners association. No regulations, no inspections, just peace, quiet, and my own rules. So when I pulled up that afternoon and noticed the heavy steel lock I'd installed was lying on the ground, cut clean in half, Ezeke felt something shift in my chest. This wasn't vandalism. It was deliberate. I stepped out of my truck slowly, scanning the area. The trees stood still. No wind, no sound. Just that open door, creaking slightly like it was inviting me to step into a trap. I already had a bad feeling about who might be behind it. Her name was Karen. Not officially, but everyone called her that. She lived about a mile down the road in a small gated community that did have an HOA. Over the past few months, she'd made it her personal mission to claim my cabin somehow fell under their jurisdiction. She'd left letters, posted warnings, even showed up once trying to lecture me about community standards. I made it very clear, my property was not part of her HOA. She didn't care. Last week, she threatened to inspect my cabin herself if I didn't comply. I laughed it off. Now I wasn't laughing. I reached into my truck and grabbed my phone, already dialing as I moved toward the door. Every instinct screamed at me not to go inside, but I had to see. As I stepped across the threshold, I noticed things had been moved. Cabinets slightly open. A chair turned at an angle I never leave it in. Someone had been here, poking through my space like they owned it. Then I heard voices. Inside. A woman's voice, sharp, entitled, unmistakable. I told you, this is completely within my authority. Karen. And then another voice, quieter, nervous. Someone with her. My grip tightened around my phone as I stepped further in, heart pounding louder with every step. Because what Karen didn't know was that she had just broken into a place she really shouldn't have. And she definitely had no idea who else was about to arrive. I moved quietly down the narrow hallway, each step controlled, careful not to alert them that I was already inside. The sound of Karen's voice echoed from the main living area, sharp and confident, like she truly believed she owned the place. "I don't care what he thinks," she snapped. "If the property is within visual range of our community, it affects property values. That gives us authority." Authority. The word made my jaw tighten. I reached the corner and slowly leaned just enough to see into the living room. Karen stood near my fireplace, arms crossed, dressed like she was attending some kind of official meeting instead of breaking into someone's cabin. Beside her was a younger guy, probably hired help or some HOA assistant, holding a clipboard and looking completely out of his depth. "This feels illegal," he muttered. Karen waved him off. "It's not illegal if it's enforcement." I almost laughed, almost. Instead, I stepped fully into the room. "It's absolutely illegal." Both of them jumped. The clipboard guy nearly dropped his papers, and Karen spun around so fast she knocked into the side table. Her eyes locked onto mine, and for the first time since I'd known her, she looked uncertain. "You!" she said, recovering quickly. "Good, you're here. This saves time." "Yeah," I replied calmly, holding up my phone. "It really does." Her gaze flicked to the screen, then back to me. "You should be thanking me. I had to cut your lock because you refused multiple notices. This cabin is in violation of HOA standards." I took a step closer. "This cabin is not in your HOA?" "It affects the neighborhood," she insisted, her voice rising. "That makes it my responsibility." "No," I said flatly. "It makes it trespassing and destruction of property." The assistant shifted nervously. Ma'am, maybe we should— Quiet, she snapped. That's when I heard it. Distant at first. Faint. Sirens. Karen didn't seem to notice. She was too busy doubling down. I'm documenting everything, she said, gesturing around. This place is clearly not up to code. You'll be receiving fines daily until— The sirens got louder. Now the assistant heard it. His head snapped toward the window. Are those for us? Karen scoffed. Don't be ridiculous, but I smiled. Because I knew exactly who those sirens belonged to. And more importantly, why they were coming. Karen crossed her arms again, trying to hold on to control. You've made a very big mistake resisting HOA authority. I shook my head slowly. No, I said. You made a much bigger one breaking in here. The sirens were no longer distant. They were right outside. And Karen still had no idea. This wasn't just a police response. The sirens cut off abruptly, replaced by something far more intense. The heavy rumble of multiple vehicles surrounding the cabin. Karen's confidence finally cracked. What is that? She asked, her voice no longer sharp but uncertain. Before I could answer, a commanding voice blasted from outside. Everyone inside the cabin, come out with your hands visible. The assistant froze. Oh my God. Karen blinked rapidly, trying to process the situation. This is ridiculous. You called the police? Over an inspection? I didn't move. Not exactly. Another voice followed, louder, more urgent. This is your final warning. Exit the building now! Karen stepped back, her composure slipping further. You've blown this completely out of proportion. I shook my head. You walked into something you were warned to stay out of. She stared at me. What is that supposed to mean? For a brief moment, I considered explaining everything. Right there. But the sound of boots hitting the ground outside made the decision for me. Fast, heavy, coordinated. This was no standard response. The assistant raised his hands instinctively. I'm going outside! Wait! Karen snapped, grabbing his arm, but he pulled free. I'm not getting arrested for this! He rushed toward the door, pushing it open and stepping out with his hands up, shouting, I'm coming out! I'm not armed! From inside, we could hear officers shouting commands, ordering him to the ground. The tension in the air thickened instantly. Karen turned back to me, panic starting to replace her anger. What did you do? I didn't do anything, I said calmly. But you did. That doesn't explain this, she shouted, gesturing wildly. Another amplified voice echoed from outside. One individual is in custody. We know there is at least one more inside. Exit now! Karen's breathing became shallow. This is insane. I'm calling my lawyer. Go ahead, I replied. You might want to call a better one than usual. She glared at me, but her hands were shaking now. You set this up. No, I said. You forced your way into a secured location. And that justifies this? She demanded. I stepped closer, lowering my voice slightly. This cabin, I said, is part of an ongoing federal investigation. The words hit her like a brick. Her face drained of color. You're lying. I'm not. Another command rang out. Last warning! Exit immediately or we will enter! Karen staggered back a step, her mind clearly racing. You're serious, she whispered. I nodded once. For weeks, I continued. They've been monitoring activity connected to this property. You cutting that lock and walking in? I paused. Worst possible timing. Outside. The sound of tactical gear shifting and footsteps approaching the door grew louder. Karen looked toward the entrance, then back at me, fear now fully visible in her eyes. Do something, she said, but there was nothing left to do, because the door suddenly shook, and everything was about to escalate. The first hit against the door sounded like a gunshot. Karen screamed. The second strike splintered the frame, sending cracks racing through the wood like lightning. I didn't flinch. I knew exactly what was coming next. Stand down! A voice shouted from outside. Final breach! Karen grabbed my arm, her nails digging in. You have to tell them to stop! I pulled away. I can't. Her panic turned into desperation. "You said this was some kind of investigation!" "Just explain to them I'm with the HOA." I almost felt bad for her. Almost. "They don't care about your HOA," I said. "They care about what this place is tied to." The third hit exploded the door inward. Wood shards flew across the room as heavily armed officers flooded in, moving with precision and speed. Black uniforms, tactical vests, weapons raised. "Hands! Let me see your hands!" one of them shouted. Karen froze for half a second too long. "Down! Now!" another officer barked. She dropped to the floor, shaking, her earlier authority completely gone. I slowly raised my hands, staying still as instructed. Within seconds, the room was secured. Two officers moved straight to Karen, pulling her arms behind her back and snapping on handcuffs despite her protests. "This is a mistake," she cried. "I'm with the HOA. I have authority." "Ma'am, you're being detained," one officer said firmly. "I didn't do anything wrong," she insisted. "He's the one violating regulations." No one responded, because none of that mattered here. Another officer approached me, lowering his weapon slightly. "Are you the property owner?" "Yes," I said calmly. He nodded. "You're clear. Step outside with me." Karen's head snapped toward me as I walked past her. "You set me up!" she shouted. I didn't respond. Outside, the scene was even more intense than she could have imagined. Multiple armored vehicles lined the clearing. Officers moved in coordinated patterns, securing the perimeter. The assistant was face down on the ground, already in cuffs. The officer beside me gestured toward one of the vehicles. "We've been watching this location for weeks," he said quietly. "You picked a bad day to have visitors." "I tried to warn her," I replied. He gave a slight nod. "Some people don't listen." Behind us, Karen was escorted out of the cabin, her face pale, her movements stiff. She looked around at the overwhelming force surrounding her, finally understanding the scale of what she had walked into. "This is insane," she whispered. One of the agents opened the back of a vehicle and guided her inside. As the door shut, her voice disappeared with it. And just like that, the woman who thought she could control everything had lost it all in a matter of minutes. But the truth was, this situation wasn't over yet. Not even close. The silence after the vehicles began pulling away felt heavier than all the chaos that came before it. I stood near the edge of the clearing, watching as the last of the tactical units wrapped up their operation. Officers moved with purpose, collecting evidence, speaking into radios, and securing the cabin once more. It was controlled now, but the weight of what had just happened still lingered in the air. Karen sat inside one of the vehicles, visible through the tinted window just enough to see her slumped posture. Gone was the confidence, the attitude, the self-appointed authority. All that remained was shock. An agent approached me holding a tablet. "We'll need a formal statement," he said. "Of course," I replied, as we talked. He confirmed what I already knew, but what Karen had walked blindly into. The cabin had been under quiet surveillance as part of a broader federal case. Nothing obvious, nothing marked. That was the point. It was supposed to stay undisturbed until she cut that lock. "What happens to her?" I asked, glancing toward the vehicle. The agent followed my gaze. "Breaking and entering, destruction of property, interference with an active federal investigation." He paused. "That's just the start." I exhaled slowly. All because she wanted to prove a point. "Some people," he said, "don't understand limits until they cross one." Nearby, the assistant was being read his rights. He looked terrified, repeatedly saying he didn't know what was going on. And honestly, I believed him. He wasn't the one making decisions. He just followed the wrong person. Karen, on the other hand, had insisted on control, and now she had none. The agent finished noting my statement and nodded. "We'll be in touch if anything else comes up. For now, you're free to go." "Thanks," I said, as the final vehicle door slammed shut and engines roared to life. I took one last look at the scene. The woods were returning to their usual stillness. like none of this had ever happened. But it had, and the consequences were just beginning for her. Days later, I heard through a neighbor that Karen's HOA had already started distancing itself. Statements were made, responsibility denied. Suddenly, the same authority she used to justify everything vanished. Fines, lawsuits, possible charges, it all stacked up fast. All because she couldn't accept one simple truth. She had no power here. I returned to my cabin a week later. The door had been repaired. A new lock installed, stronger than before. As I stood there, looking at the quiet forest around me, I couldn't help but think about how quickly everything had spiraled. One cut lock, one bad decision, and a lesson she'd never forget. Some lines aren't meant to be crossed. And when they are, the consequences don't ask for permission.
Officer, we need to secure the perimeter now.
Understood. What's the status?
Time is critical. Coordinate with the team.
Roger that. Moving now.
Good. Stay alert. Report any movement. What do you mean leave? We can't just go?
Ma'am, it's for your safety. Please get in the car. Officer, what's going on? Is she in danger? Sir, we need you to step back now.
This is insane.